In 1894, a quiet man inherited the crown of the Russian Empire. His name was Nicholas Alexandrovich Romanov, soon to be Nicholas II, emperor and autocrat of all the Russias. He wore the crown with the solemnity of duty, not desire, but behind the pageantry. The empire was already fracturing. Russia was vast, powerful, but restless. Beneath the grandeur of palaces and imperial courts lay grinding poverty, a crushed peasantry, and workers pushed to breaking. Revolution simmered in shadows. Ideas once whispered in alleys began to roar in factories and fields. Nicholas ruled with tradition in his veins. He believed in divine right, in autocracy. Reform was weakness, compromise, betrayal. But the world was changing. Russia's enemies modernized, her people radicalized, and Nicholas, aloof and stubborn, resisted the tide. In 1905, the first blow struck. A peaceful protest led by workers, women, and priests marched toward the Winter Palace. They carried icons, not weapons. They sang hymns, but the Tsar's troops opened fire. Dozens were killed. The day became known as Bloody Sunday. Trust in the monarchy cracked. Nicholas survived the first revolution. He offered reforms, then took them back. The years passed, but the wounds deepened. When World War I arrived in 1914, it brought hope of national unity. Instead, it brought ruin. Russia's army was unprepared. Millions of men died. The economy collapsed. Hunger gnawed through the cities, and at the center of it all, the Tsar seemed distant and confused. He left the capital to command the army, leaving the government to his wife Alexandra and to the mystic Rasputin. Whispers of corruption and scandal echoed through St. Petersburg. The monarchy's image darkened. Faith turned to fury. In March 1917, revolution exploded again. Strikes, mutinies, protesters filled the streets. Even the soldiers refused to fire. The Duma turned against him. Generals urged abdication. And so, on March 15, 1917, Nicholas stepped down. He did not fight. He did not flee. He abdicated quietly for himself and for his sickly son, Alexei. His brother refused the crown, and just like that, the dynasty ended. 3 centuries of Romanov rule vanished in a single day. The royal family was placed under arrest, first held in the Alexander Palace, then moved east to Tobolsk in Siberia, out of sight, out of power, out of time. They were no longer emperor and empress, just Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children: Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, a family in exile, fading into history as Russia changed around them. But revolution does not stop with abdication. In the months to come, a darker chapter would unfold. The family was still together, still alive. And far from the eyes of the world, history prepared its blade. April 1918, the Romanovs are moved once more, this time to a modest 2-story house in the city of Ekaterinburg. From the outside, it appears unremarkable, just another merchant's residence on a quiet street. But to the Bolsheviks, it has a grim designation: the house of special purpose. Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children: Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and the ailing young Alexei arrive under heavy guard. Gone are the palace walls, the servants, the rituals of power. In their place, painted windows, locked doors, and rifles watching from every corner. Inside, the house becomes a prison. The family is confined to a few small rooms on the 2nd floor. The girls sleep in one, the Tsar and Empress in another. Alexei, often too ill to move, lies on a cot nearby. Privacy no longer exists. Conversations are overheard. Letters are censored. Every moment is monitored. The guards are crude, often mocking. Some steal from the family. Others show flashes of sympathy. But the tension is constant. At night, boots echo in the halls. During the day, the children clean floors, read, and whisper prayers. Alexandra writes in her diary. Her health failing, Nicholas chops wood in the yard, his imperial dignity shrinking to routine. Outside the city, the Russian Civil War rages. The anti-Bolshevik White Army approaches. Their goal, to retake territory and perhaps rescue the Romanovs. To the Bolsheviks, that is unacceptable. The family represents more than bloodlines. They are a symbol of monarchy, of power, of the old world. Their existence threatens the revolution's future. In Moscow, silent decisions are made. Communications grow tense. Telegrams are coded. No official decree is publicly declared. But the implication is clear. Preparations in the house shift. The guards become more secretive. Visitors are barred. A room in the basement is cleared. The family doesn't know why. They continue their routines, reading scripture, sewing, caring for Alexei. Alexandra clutches her icons. The daughters hum hymns. Nicholas gazes from the window at a world that no longer belongs to him. There is still hope, perhaps, that they will be sent abroad, exchanged, spared. But each day feels heavier than the last. The walls feel closer. The guards more silent. No trial, no sentence, no farewell, just a growing stillness. And underneath it all, a sense unspoken, but certain that the end is near. The house of special purpose is no longer a prison. It is a tomb in waiting. Midnight, July 17, 1918. Ekaterinburg lies silent beneath a moonless sky. Inside the house of special purpose, the Romanov family sleeps, unaware that history has only a few more hours left for them. A sudden knock. Boots on the floor. The family is awakened. They're told they must move quickly. The White Army is approaching the city. The house is no longer safe. They are to be evacuated to a new location. The urgency sounds real. Nicholas helps dress the children. Alexandra clutches her prayer book. Alexei, too weak to walk, is lifted by his father into his arms. The girls carry small pillows and their final belongings. Quietly, they descend the staircase one last time. In the basement, a single chair sits in the center of a bare, whitewashed room. Alexei is placed there. The others stand close by. The servants line up along the wall. They wait for orders. Yakov Yurovsky enters with a piece of paper in his hand. 11 armed men stand behind him. No one speaks. The air thickens. The sentence is read aloud. Nicholas Alexandrovich, by order of the Ural Soviet, you and your family are to be executed. Confusion flickers in Nicholas's face. A single word escapes him. What? Then the guns fire. Nicholas's. The first two fall. Alexandra next. The room erupts in smoke, screams, confusion. The Grand Duchesses cry out. Bullets strike. But something's wrong. The corsets worn by the girls, sewn secretly with diamonds, deflect the bullets. The guards panic. The room echoes with ricochets. Bayonets are drawn. Chaos turns to brutality. One by one, the daughters are stabbed, shot again, struck until they fall silent. Alexei, still seated, remains alive. His killers return later, when the smoke has cleared. He is shot in the head, twice, even in death. They are afraid of him. The basement is soaked in blood. The walls pocked with bullet holes. 11 bodies lie twisted on the stone floor. The Tsar, the Tsarina, their 5 children. And for faithful servants. Outside, no one knows. No announcement, no witness, no fanfare. The revolution doesn't need symbols. It needs silence. In the hours that follow, the bodies will be stripped, burned, disfigured. The faces unrecognizable. The identities obscured. Even in death, their presence must be erased. But something lingers in the basement, the weight of legacy, the violence of endings, the end of an empire in a single room. The executions are over, but the truth has only begun to unravel. What happened that night will be buried for now. The murders are over, but the story isn't finished. 11 bodies lie still in the cellar. The job isn't complete until the remains disappear, until history itself is buried. A truck is brought to the house. It groans under the weight of the corpses, wrapped hastily in bedsheets. The drive begins through the dark outskirts of Ekaterinburg. Their destination, the Koptyaki forest, a lonely stretch of woods pockmarked with abandoned mine shafts. The plan is simple: drop the bodies down a pit, set fire to them, and walk away. But the old mine is shallow. The bodies don't sink. The truck breaks down on the way. Panic sets in. Orders are barked. Shovels dig into frozen earth. Acid is poured across the faces of the dead. Bullets fired into already lifeless skulls. The executioners are clumsy, disorganized, terrified of being caught by advancing White Army forces. The bodies are burned with gasoline. Some are broken into pieces. Clothing is destroyed in a nearby fire. The children's remains too small, too fragile, are handled separately. Two corpses, believed to be Alexei and one of his sisters, are buried in a second grave, deeper in the woods, away from the others. It's done in haste. No markers, no crosses, no names. Back in Ekaterinburg, the Bolsheviks release a statement. Nicholas Romanov has been executed. That's all. No mention of Alexandra. No word of the children. The message is vague by design. Let the world wonder. And it does. In the West, newspapers speculate. Some believe only the Tsar has died. Others claim the family is in hiding, rescued by loyalists. The Soviet regime says nothing more. Silence becomes a shield. With no bodies and no answers, the myth begins to bloom. Maybe Anastasia survived. Maybe Alexei was smuggled to safety. Maybe a guard had mercy. Maybe a secret passage beneath the house led to freedom. The lack of evidence becomes fuel for imagination. Conspiracies flourish. Imposters emerge. But in the forest, the truth lies cold beneath the soil. The grave site remains undisturbed for decades. Trees grow over the disturbed earth. Snow buries the outlines of disturbed ground. The fire-blackened skulls rest quietly. In the dark, holding secrets that no one is yet ready to uncover. Years pass. Then decades. The Soviet Union rises and rules, denying and forgetting. The House of Special Purpose is demolished in 1977. No plaque, no monument. Only a church official knows its exact location. The killers age and die. The silence remains intact, but the earth forgets nothing, and though the story has been forced underground, one day the bones will rise, and with them, the truth. The gunfire had stopped. The basement had gone quiet. The bodies were gone. But the story was just beginning. In the aftermath of the Romanov murders, confusion reigned. The Bolsheviks remained silent about the fate of the Empress and her children. Whispers trickled out of Russia, unconfirmed, incomplete, and mysterious. Had they all been killed, or had someone survived? The world clung to the one thing the Soviet state could not extinguish: uncertainty. Then, in 1920, a woman was pulled from a Berlin canal. She was drenched, mute, and scarred. She called herself Anna Anderson, or rather, she refused to say who she was until someone guessed. "Are you Anastasia?" She didn't deny it. What followed was a whirlwind. Supporters emerged exiled. Russian nobles, servants who claimed to recognize her, old Romanov acquaintances. Her mannerisms, they said, were convincing. She had the same foot deformity as the Grand Duchess. She seemed to know things no commoner could know. Anderson claimed she had been rescued from the massacre by a compassionate guard, spirited out of Russia, hidden in fear. Her trauma, she said, explained her memory gaps and her silence. For decades, the question swirled. Courts debated it. Journalists investigated it. The public romanticized it. Could a Romanov have survived? The idea intoxicated a world still reeling from war and revolution. Films were made. Books sold by the thousands. Anastasia became more than a person. She became a symbol. A myth in pearls. The lost princess of a fallen world. Anderson lived for decades under the shadow of that claim. Some of the remaining Romanovs dismissed her. Others refused to speak publicly. Scientists couldn't prove anything. There were no bodies to compare, no DNA to test. Just stories and silence. She died in 1984, still insisting she was Anastasia. But the truth, as it often does, was buried deeper in the woods near Ekaterinburg, under layers of mud. Lies and history. In 1991, a grave was discovered. 9 bodies. Forensic analysis identified Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters. But 2 were missing: Alexei and 1 girl. The legend breathed again. Had Anna told the truth after all? Then, in 2007, a second grave was found. Burned bones, teeth. DNA confirmed the final 2 children. Alexei and his sister had been buried separately. The family was complete, and the legend was over. Anna Anderson was not Anastasia. She was Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker with a history of mental illness. But for nearly a century, the world had wanted her to be royalty, To believe that even in a storm of bullets and revolution, a single life had slipped through, that hope, like a hidden diamond, had survived the fire. Sometimes, history tells us what we want to hear, but truth, it waits, patient and cold, in the ground. For decades, the truth about the Romanovs lay buried beneath politics, silence, and the cold earth of the Urals. The Soviet regime had erased their memory from textbooks, demolished their final residence, and forbidden any public inquiry. But history doesn't disappear. It waits. In 1991, the waiting ended. Just outside Ekaterinburg, in a wooded area known to locals, but long forgotten by officials, a grave was found. Amateurs, historians, local enthusiasts, scientists dug carefully into the soil. What they uncovered were human remains, 9 skeletons, broken, scorched, and scattered. 2 were clearly adult, the rest younger. Some bones bore marks of acid, others signs of fire. Among the fragments, a small dog's remains, Jemmy, Alexei's loyal companion. Analysis began in secrecy, but soon exploded into international attention. For the first time in decades, the fate of the Romanovs could be answered not by rumor, but by science. Russian, British, and American scientists joined forces. DNA from the bones was compared with living descendants of the Romanov line, including Britain's Prince Philip. Mitochondrial DNA told a clear story. The remains belonged to Tsar Nicholas II, Empress Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters, but something was missing. 2 bodies, those of Alexei and one of the Grand Duchesses, were not in the grave. The legend reignited. Had Anna Anderson truly been Anastasia? Was Alexei saved? Could part of the myth still be real? Years passed. Debate raged. Conspiracies flared. Then, in 2007, another discovery. Just 70 meters from the first site, a second, smaller, grave was unearthed. Inside, charred bone fragments, teeth, shards of skull. The remains had been burned, hacked, and buried in haste. This time, DNA testing was more precise. The technology had evolved. Genetic markers from the remains matched those of the first grave. The missing Romanovs, Alexei and one sister, had been found. There were no survivors, no secret rescues, no exiled heirs. Just bones, ashes, proof. The myth of Anastasia died a second death, this time by forensic certainty. But even in truth, the legacy remained powerful. The Romanovs became more than a family. They became a symbol of downfall, of mystery, of how empires end, not with ceremony, but with silence, bullets, and burial. With the family's identities confirmed, attention turned to honoring the dead. In 1998, 80 years after their deaths, Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 daughters were laid to rest in St. Petersburg's Peter and Paul Cathedral. A state funeral, quiet, somber, symbolic. The Russian flag draped their coffins. Church bells rang. The Tsar returned home, but not all were convinced. The Russian Orthodox Church hesitated to accept the findings. Doubt lingered, especially over the identity of the last 2 children. Yet the science was clear. The data didn't lie. The remains were real. The story was complete. After 8 decades, 11 bodies had been accounted for. The ghosts of the Romanovs were no longer lost. They had names again. They had graves. They had peace. The story that began in a gilded palace and ended in a blood-stained basement does not conclude in silence. After decades of denial, lies, and burial beneath frost and stone, the Romanovs were not forgotten. Their memory, long erased, returned. Not in vengeance, but in reverence. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized Nicholas II, Alexandra, and their children as passion-bearers, not saints for miracles, but martyrs of endurance. They had met death with resignation, with prayer, with suffering, not rulers anymore, but a family led to slaughter, not sovereigns, but victims. 8 years earlier, in 1992, their remains had been confirmed. In 1998, they were finally laid to rest. St. Petersburg, once the imperial capital, welcomed them home. The Peter and Paul Cathedral, burial place of Romanov emperors, opened its doors once more. Under a sky gray with mourning and flags half raised, their coffins were carried one by one into the cathedral. The Russian anthem played. The Tsar's bones were lowered beside Peter the Great. Catherine the Great, and the long line of rulers who had shaped an empire. But not all joined in mourning. President Boris Yeltsin, who attended the funeral, offered words of regret, calling their murder a disgraceful page in Russia's history. Yet many citizens remained ambivalent. To some, the Romanovs were still symbols of privilege, of oppression, of failure. Others wept openly, clutching portraits, lighting candles, whispering prayers. The church hesitated. Doubt lingered over the authenticity of the remains, despite overwhelming scientific evidence. Officials questioned whether the burial was premature, and still, two of the Romanovs, Alexei and one daughter, had not yet been buried with the rest. Though discovered in 2007 and confirmed by DNA, their bodies remain in storage, awaiting full ecclesiastical recognition. Above the cellar where the family died, a new structure rises. The Apativ house, once secretive, silent, and soaked in blood, was demolished in 1977 by Soviet leaders seeking to erase the site's memory. In its place now stands the church on the blood. White walls, golden domes, icons of the Imperial family. Pilgrims visit daily. Candles flicker. The floor where Nicholas fell is now sacred. History does not always offer justice, but it remembers. The Romanov story has become a mirror reflecting Russia's struggle to reconcile its past. An empire that collapsed, a revolution that devoured itself, a family that became legend. Then memory, then relic. They were not perfect. Nicholas resisted change. Alexandra trusted the wrong men. But in their final days, they were simply human, frightened, confined together. Their story is not just about royalty. It is about loss, about how quickly the world can turn, about what is buried and what refuses to stay hidden. In the end, they returned home, to the city that crowned them, to the cathedral that holds their ancestors, to a Russia still searching for itself, not as monarchs, but as echoes. As prayers whispered beneath candlelight, as names etched into stone, as the last breath of an empire, now still,